You're being just weird. You look weird, you act weird, you say weird stuff, and you don't have any expressions on your face. This video is really dedicated to INTJs and their deceiving blind spot function. I mean, let's talk about the one thing that an INTJ really cannot outsmart or even control, and it is their own extroverted feeling deceiving function. Let's go through functions quickly and then let's discuss what kind of effect actually having extroverted feeling in the blind spot, in the deceiving slot. What does that mean to have a function like that as an INTJ? So INTJs are directing, responding from their interaction style, which means that they are likely to be more passive rather than interacting and initiating. So INTJs are also utilitarian and systematic, which means that outcome matters more than people. And they like to imagine that things are a system, that things work in a certain way in this society and world. INTJ's first function is the introverted intuition, and that is their leading function. It really means that an INTJ will really use willpower to go through life. They believe actually that will is really important when it comes to moving forward with your life. Like, they see in other people's potentials, they see what are the things humans could achieve if they just trusted in their own gut feeling, willpower, and would really fulfill their potential. Because this function is in like an optimistic slot, it means also that they do like to move fast. They like to decide things fast, and once they have decided something, they really can devote themselves in the long run, in the big scheme of things. But at the same time, if they have not devoted themselves into something, they can really draw fast conclusions into like, oh, this doesn't work out. And the best part, I guess, about INTJs regarding this is that they can get really curious, they can get really metaphysical, they can get really abstract. They like to think about like alternative scenarios, but they also like to put those puzzle pieces together and find like a golden or like a common thread of things. Their next function is extroverted thinking, which is in the supporting slot. And now we're kind of getting into the dynamics of how does like a blind spot also work. How does the INTJ actually choose what is meaningful or purposeful in their life, and how does an INTJ make decisions? Well, INTJs are all about gathering accurate information and making sure that information is also correct. INTJs can look at things like credentials, people's achievements, their qualifications. What are the reasons why this person's information or this source of information would work or it would be true? This function is also sensitive about reputation. So it's kind of protecting themselves from the outside world a bit, not wanting to put themselves into places where they could potentially like ruin their reputation. INTJs want to come across as like they know a lot, they are knowledgeable and smart. They do not like to be downplayed with their thinking. This function really makes INTJs goal-oriented and systematic as well. And once they can really grasp this function, they can really be like, okay, this is my goal. I need to now work towards that. I need to now do my best to achieve a goal. And since this function is more like a parenting attitude, it means that the INTJ can end up in an analysis paralysis, which means that instead of doing things, they actually just think of doing them. Instead of actually achieving things, they just imagine achieving them. And because they have a parenting attitude with this function, they expect that other people think like them. Like, other people also care about credentials, achievements, etc., which is why their like opposite would be an introverted thinking user who really does not care about that and just assumes and just thinks about if the logic makes sense itself, instead of looking at these external sources of validation. And I mean, everything is about balance. So this function is balanced by the introverted feeling childish function, which, by the way, is one of the most important functions for us to dive into, because now we're going to really understand how does an INTJ navigate, how do they counter their extroverted feeling blind spot, trickster, deceiving function. The INTJ can become overly dependent on their own emotions, values, feelings, identity even, but it's a childish, naive way. So I don't think an INTJ necessarily realizes that, but how you can see this happening would be, for example, that for an INTJ it's really difficult to hide your feelings. Like, if you're feeling bad in a certain situation with people, people will notice it, because an INTJ doesn't know how to kind of hide what you're going through, what are your like emotions. In some sense, you could say INTJ is like most authentic because their introverted feeling, which is the authentic function, is in the childish spot. If it's sad, it's sad. If it's happy, it's happy. Like, how do you navigate that emotion? How do you control that emotion? This is exactly why an INTJ will believe thinking that they're either don't need other people, so this kind of superiority complex. Well, I'm too different. I don't understand these people. I don't need to understand. I don't want to understand, you know? Like INTJ can really go into their introverted intuition, introverted feeling bubble. It's just like, I don't need other people. So this kind of over independence. Or they get fixated on a goal, which makes them feel good about themselves, which is like, oh, if I achieve these things, I don't need other people. So like they become a workaholic, or if I earn a certain amount of money, or if I gather a certain amount of knowledge, so whatever the goal is that can distract you from the fact that you might not feel belonging with other people. You don't know how to navigate a social setting, or it gives you anxiety to be navigating that setting. But the craziest part is that all humans are social animals and everyone needs to learn to be among humans. So an INTJ might think they are in control of their life, but the deceiving extrovert feeling is actually telling them, yeah, you are in control in your life. You are. Like, you don't need other people. You don't need to understand the society. You don't need to understand other people's emotions. You know enough. You know how you feel about it, and that's all that matters. You know what's the vision. You know what you want. That's the most important thing. But this itself is an extroverted feeling trickster deceiving function talking to you, telling you that that's not important, and actually blinding you from the truth. So we are already covering the extroverted feeling, which is obviously the opposite of the introverted feeling, because the extroverted feeling, blindspot deceiving, will be using the introverted feeling to confuse the ego, to confuse the INTJ. For every single personality, it is the exact same thing happening. But there's also other functions in play. So like extrovert sensing inferior means that when an INTJ gets inspired by really wanting to perform for others, really wanting to understand the social context, that's when they can really become really talented and skillful in that. On the other hand, INTJs can feel really strong social anxiety in being in groups. And this can be the reason why an INTJ can also go into this kind of analysis paralysis, trying to again distract themselves from the fact that they do not know how to get along with people. And for an INTJ, or being with an INTJ, it's really important to kind of give them support when it comes to their actions. Like, hey, you look really good today. What you're wearing today looks nice. Thank you for helping me with something. Thank you for doing these things, because an INTJ with their extrovert sensing inferior really needs that kind of support. And they really want to feel useful for others. They don't want to be just like useless people. And INTJs mirror others when it comes to these kind of things. Due to the fact that they have introvert sensing demon, INTJ is not about like disciplining themselves or like what are my like boundaries or what are my fundamentals. It's more like testing boundaries of others. Where do your boundaries stand? Like, what is self-discipline? How do you do self-discipline? And I'm not talking about now willpower or things you vision and you do things to achieve something, but rather just like doing things for the sake of doing it. INTJ needs an SI user to be mirroring that behavior on themselves and to understand that and to really have some discipline in your life. An extroverted intuition as the nemesis function, as being like worried, confused about, really makes an INTJ really paranoid as well. It's like not understanding what are other people's emotions or worrying that other people's intentions are not good. And INTJs are one of those types that really need a lot of communication because of their extroverted feeling blind spot and their extroverted intuition worrying function makes them really not understanding what do other people want from them. And INTJs can become really paranoid. It can be like, why are you doing something like that? Why is that important? It can be really scary, especially in like relationships and stuff like that, if the other person is not communicating directly or giving some reason for that conflict, because an INTJ is the first one to leave. Like, the INTJ does not want to be committed to something that does not make sense long run, or disloyalty. So it's so important to be communicated with an INTJ. But also, it's not always other people's fault. Like, if the other person is communicating to you, but the INTJ still is like drawn away from the reality, because the INTJ is still an introverted type, so they do go through the internal processing of things. So like if the INTJ is not seeing the external signs of like maybe that person is actually committed, maybe there's no reason for me to be paranoid, or not even just committed, but like it can be any situation where it comes to like just understanding other people's intentions and also needs and where they come from. And then when we have the introverted thinking, it's all about like not being sure of what do you yourself think, always wanting to verify information from the outside. But it's really helpful for an INTJ to be around other introverted thinking users, because they really ask INTJ, so based on what do you think that's true? And the INTJ might need to actually develop their logical reasoning skills and not just citing other sources or applying other sources as if it was their information in the first place, or just being really insecure about their own like understanding and logical reasoning. It is healthy for an INTJ to develop their internal logical reasoning. Okay, let's really jump into the interesting part. So, extroverted feeling blind spot INTJs. Let's put it this way. Ironically, the thing that the INTJ fears the most, which is the human connection and belonging in a group, is actually what can give an INTJ kind of like a purpose or depth in life. That's how ironic it is. I mean, no one is aware of the hypocrisy of their own deceiving function. Like, no one understands how manipulative it is. And that's why we have these videos, to kind of let us give ourselves a bit of awareness and consciousness to understand what does it mean to have a blind spot in your personality. Extroverted feeling is a function of needs, emotions, like external emotions, understanding other people, really, community. A lot of those things come from extroverted feeling. Social context even. And specifically for women who have an extroverted feeling blind spot can be extremely difficult, because women and femininity is linked to like a maturity in extroverted feeling, like a maturity in knowing when to sacrifice yourself for the sake of your family, for the sake of your community, whatever it might be. This is just because the stereotypical woman is just a complete opposite of extroverted feeling blind spot. That's why for women it's difficult. But I'm not saying it's not difficult for men. Like, it is difficult for INTJ men as well, because they might not understand, why am I struggling to connect with people on a deeper level? What is the reason I just can't connect with another person? And I just want to say, for an INTJ who's struggling with this, like, sometimes knowing how to surrender for other people can really lead you to understand it, and not to think that your introverted feeling knows it, because your introverted feeling is a childish, naive function. It doesn't really understand itself even. It's really difficult for an INTJ to understand your own emotions, to kind of reflect on it and kind of go through them. Maybe just have to accept that in some sense, because you can't control that, right? And as an INTJ, you want to control, like, you want to feel like you have control over your life. But when it comes to extroverted feeling, trickster, deceiving, the more you're trying to control it, the more it actually controls you. So you kind of have to just surrender in the way of like, I can't maybe understand why this is important, or I can't feel why this is important, but the outcome might show you that it was the right decision. That is maybe a bit abstract right now. In a more like concrete way, it's more like INTJs don't know how to show that they care about other people. Introverted feeling users are warm from the inside, and it's always balanced by people like extrovert feeling users who are warm from the outside. So it's like extroverted feeling users always know how to make other people feel warm. They know what is the atmosphere. So the crazy part about extroverted feeling deceiving is really that you're being the most vulnerable, because you have an introverted feeling childish, naive function. You're the most vulnerable to your own emotions. If the introverted feeling is questioned, it can feel really attacked, defensive about that. But the craziest part is that you don't necessarily know how to care for others. You don't know how to show that you have deep emotion. You don't know how to like show other people that you do care. It's almost like paradoxical in that sense, that the person who is like feeling the most, or like has the most depth maybe even, it's not projected externally. It's not. For other people, it might look like you don't have anything, like you're just a cold person. If an INTJ is having like a relationship, let's say an INTJ is like falling in love with someone, they might not even understand that, and they might not know how to tell the other person they love them, but through actions and through maybe pattern recognition, they might realize I'm actually falling in love with this person, and maybe even their own emotions towards that person is really strong. In that sense, when the INTJ is having a really deep individual connection to that person, then maybe they can be really direct and honest about that. But like if we're talking about things that are not so clear, like for example your friends, or like a neighbor that you really like, or someone who is not that close and does not have that strong of an individual connection with you, how do you make them feel like you care about them when your introverted feeling is not deeply attached to them yet? I always say that like extroverted feeling users are really great at kind of on the surface level emotional connection. They might not understand always the depth of emotion though, because they don't experience that themselves. But the introverted feeling users really have the depth. People like INTJs and even ISTJs, because they share the extroverted feeling blind spot, they have the depth, but they have no awareness of the surface. Like how do you use emotional atmosphere to soothe people, to make people want to join you? Why would people want to be your friends? Like really INTJ, why do people want to be with you? Like just give me one reason. And no, it's not because like you're interesting as a person, or like you are smart, you're intelligent. You might be great in many ways, but like really, like why do other people want to be your friends? The honest truth is people are friends to each other because they both provide, they're reciprocal towards each other. So like if you don't learn how to use extroverted feeling to some degree, or use your introverted feeling at least in a positive way, you are burdening other people. Although you keep it in yourself though, but you're also burdening other people because you can't connect with other people properly due to the fact that you have not resolved kind of that deceiving function. Like an INTJ is great at organizing and commanding people, you know, with their extrovert thinking. Like they do know how to do things. They want to solve things. They want solutions for problems. They don't want to be just like talking about useless stuff. INTJ, believe me, you're 100% happier if you actually learn how to care for others, how to sacrifice for others, how to make people feel loved, really. Like how to make people feel good around you. And because that will just affect your own introverted feeling, and also extrovert sensing, by the way. And I do know it's the weakness, and that's exactly why we're covering it right now. And it's so confusing because like INTJs, they might have so much like color and like interesting things inside of them. For example, if they make a joke that could be really funny, but the way the INTJ does that, like in a sarcastic way, it's like the INTJ's face is not smiling. INTJ's body language could even be awkward. And then you make a joke that is like dark or something. And then everyone else is like, you're being just weird. You look weird, you act weird, you say weird stuff, and you don't have any expressions on your face. You could learn a bit to develop those things so that you ensure that other people are not misinterpreting you, if you know what I mean. Extroverted feeling is really about creating a community, creating a sense of purpose, caring for others, understanding other people's needs, and actually prioritizing those above you. Kind of this superficial emotional connection. Superficial sounds bad, but maybe like a surface level emotional connection. And these are the things that an INTJ has to learn through using their other functions, how to navigate through. Because sense of belonging is important for anyone, honestly. You don't have to feel belonging to every single community. That's completely fine. But at least like choose one community that you actually want to belong to. And also trying to understand others, because you do get closer to the truth and how people are once you start understanding the atmosphere, the context, the norms, what other people consider as important and why, the needs of other people. And because of this blind spot, it might tell you don't trust people. It might tell you those are not worth of being with. It might even give you this kind of superiority complex. It's like the extroverted feeling blind spot, the manipulator is telling you, do not consider other people important. Do not think that you need to feel belonging anywhere. Those are the things it might tell you. And to some degree, it might be true, but it also might lead you really far away from the life you really want to be building for yourself. So how do you navigate with this function? Well, you can really cover extroverted feeling just developing the other functions that are balancing it. The introverted feeling, the extroverted thinking, having some humility in those, being open to be criticized, really learning to put others above yourself. I really think that is the key. Most importantly, really, is that INTJ, how are you navigating your own vulnerability? Because your deceiving function is telling you that You don't need to deal with that. You don't need to deal with your own vulnerability, and also the fact that you don't know where your morals and emotions stand because they're not important. But at the same time, you're obviously affected by them, like at all times. That is your deceiving function talking to you. That's your deceiving function navigating you to the wrong direction. And I know INTJs reflect on themselves, but also reflect on themselves in the ways that might feel uncomfortable. When you notice your defense going up, why is that? Is it because there is someone else who you don't have connection with, who is questioning the deep emotion inside you, deep value inside you that you had no idea you're even living with? Really go out of your way to understand why people do things, what is important to them, what do they need, why do we have this community, and what is the strength of an extrovert feeling. You can even get inspired by it. You know, it really is not about not having a deceiving function. All of us do have, and they do always manipulate and deceive our lives. But the more conscious we become and aware of that, the more we can really develop that side of us. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video insightful. Follow and like this video for supporting me. Thank you.